Welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program, and thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Daniel Davis, and I'll tell you, we've got a dynamite show, as our guest that we're having on today is someone that we've had on our program before, and, you know, it seems that in a world of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, self-help, there seems to be a sea of it out there, but, for instance, on our program, we get attracted to and seem to attract some of what we would consider the top people out there that what I would say aren't the kind of people that just write books for the sake of saying, well, I'm going to piggyback off of somebody else's work. I'm going to give you a book and maybe share a few of my own personal insights and a couple of steps and strategies for helping you arrive to the life that you think you were meant to live. But every once in a while, as I say, you know, somebody comes out of the coal mine, so to speak, as a real diamond. And our guest joining us today for the last 25 years has produced over 35 books and audio programs that have sold over 1 million copies in 18 languages worldwide. Now, to me, that's pretty big because it says that not only does this message resonate with people here who understand, for instance, English, but also other languages around the world. In other words, it's touching people. It actually makes sense what he has produced. And we had him on our program last time, and I'll tell you, it was really a wonderful, engaging conversation. And I got to say, I've talked with a lot of people, you know, who work in this field of what you would call self-help or personal empowerment. And I really enjoyed this guest. I know you will too, because his message is so genuine. It's definitely from the heart, and that can only mean that he lives this through experience, and also through the experience of how he's able to transform others. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is author of a new book, The Essential Laws of Fearless Living. Find the power to never feel powerless again. And wouldn't we all like to feel that, especially those of us in jobs that we can't stand, where the boss knows that we feel powerless. And our guest joining us today is Guy Finley. And Guy, we'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Daniel, I'm delighted to be with you again.
You bet. Now, 35 books. You know, how does your message become different or refreshing or new with so many books?
Great question, and one that I'm really happy to speak about because it will tie in eventually with all that we're going to learn together about the possibility of being a fearless human being. Daniel, we are meant as human beings to grow. And I don't mean grow in the sense of, you know, well, I went to Spain and then I went to England, and now I can, you know, speak of these two countries. You know, that's a form of growth where we take in impressions about the world around us and are able to exercise the knowledge we gain on those journeys. But when it comes to our real life, our inner life, the world within ourselves that really determines how we experience the world outside of ourselves, it's meant to be an increasingly expansive world. And by that I mean we're meant to continually take in deeper and broader, richer, truer impressions about the nature of the world we live in, the nature of the world within us, and our relationship between the two. So that as we grow as humans, and you know, all of us, let me put this in a simpler context, who amongst us hasn't had a certain kind of crisis or 20 take place in their lives, where on the other side of it, we came out enriched for what we discovered about ourselves and everyone else around us.
Mm-hmm.
So what my life is, basically, is a continual exploration of these parts of ourselves that are meant to be discovered. And when I know you know this, Daniel, you go someplace and you see a beautiful sight or you read something and it stirs you, or you hear music and you're moved, you want, because of the depth, the profundity of your experience, to share that with others.
Mm-hmm.
And as you are capable of experiencing these things more and more deeply, naturally you're able to speak more clearly about the things that you're being given to see. Well, that's my story.
I know that when you think about even friends, family, just people in relationships, it seems that fear is obviously something that we speak even underneath what we're saying. It's something that we feel underneath what we're feeling and doing. So you kind of wonder now, is fear supposedly, first of all, the question is, where did we learn to fear? Where does that come from? Is it our parents? Is it something that's passed down from generation to generation, or is it something that's actually learned as you grow? And that's the interesting part, because it's through that fear that we begin to see and live in the world. And you wonder, how can you break that veil so you can enjoy the roller coaster ride that life can throw at you?
Yeah, it's a good question, Daniel. The answer is that both are true, but if we're willing and want to go into it, we can take a nice deep look at how this all has come to pass. And those of you who are listening to us, some of the things that I'm going to say, I know I've been talking for 30 years. It's possible, if not likely, that you may not understand immediately the things that I'm saying. But if you listen and let what Daniel and I talk about just fall on you, on your sensing of the rightness of it, of the truth of it, it'll do the rest for you. That's the beauty of what's true. So first of all, the first thing we need to know, Daniel, is that the world that we see around us, not natural world, but the world of commerce, society, religion, family, the world that we see around us is a world that we have made in our own image over millennia. Now, what that means is that everything that we take as being the fundamental common experience and the creations that produce it are the product of a mind that, starting thousands of years ago, began to interact with a physical world, a natural world, and through a process of adaptation, imagination, began to deal with what it was looking at, and through a natural order of wanting to find freedom from things that frightened it, like woolly mammoths and saber-tooths and tyrannosaurus, disease, dark nights, all of these things that we began, this mind of ours, which we all share in common, began to want to have control over its environment. And again, this is natural. Nothing wrong at all in that. Mm-hmm. But what we need to see further is that the way in which the mind achieves this domination over its environment is by first creating in itself an idea about what it's looking at. In order for the mind to grasp something, Daniel, it first forms an object or a thought about that which it's dealing with.
Okay.
Now, when the mind formulates these thoughts, it does so because then it... You think about a dark night full of frightening creatures, and we can make this about someone lying in bed worrying about their finances, right? I mean,
I was just about to say, we'll make the dark night a boss at a job that you can't stand, but you feel disabled that you can't leave that because of finances.
Right. So what the mind does is it needs to have something finite, and it creates objects or thoughts by which it can then begin to recognize and deal with, according to its perception, the problem. But here's the first clue. Is my thought about the boss? Or is my thought about the boss, my experience of the boss, condensed into a neat package that contains all of my negative experience with him, and that's basically it?
Yeah, that's just that. That was just what I was just remembering a part in your book when we were talking about fear and anger, and this what you were just saying really kind of hits on the spot. And it says here, fear and anger, as is true of all negative states, are undercover agents, as you were just describing. Their sole task in any moment of conflict with life is to rush in and cover up any possible impression that would otherwise reveal we don't possess the powers we pretend to. And I can see where when you say that, it's a matter of learning how to move through your fear to see the experience and gain the experience that you want to or that your soul desires to learn from, is to simply take a look and question that thought that you have that would be blocking you. Kind of describe that a little bit further. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but as a way that maybe our guests can say, oh, it couldn't be that simple, but you know that it is.
Well, it is, and we will examine this hopefully so thoroughly that all of us leave this dialogue of Daniel's and mine a bit more free. Mm-hmm. So we asked, well, is it just the way the mind works, or is it our culture? Basically, we started this question. Okay. So what we're examining is how the mind, in order to liberate itself from things that it was frightened by, created conditions, naturally, through progress, medicine, science, all good, by which it was able to extricate itself from what was overpowering it, what was greater than itself, so to speak. But that same mind, with its use of imagination, has a kind of I'll use these words, a dark side. And here's the dark side of that same mind that's able, on one hand, to create for itself instruments, tools, to liberate itself from what frightens it physically, into a way in which the mind, as part of our culture, what we're born into, begins to defeat itself by producing an unsuspected source of fear. And here's how it works. I don't want to be a lonely human being. I don't want to be lonely anymore. Mm-hmm. And so my mind says, well, the way not to be lonely is to find a partner. Become involved in something, a community service, or do something so that you're not left by yourself anymore. And that, to the mind, that's rational, it makes sense. And so it goes out and it looks for someone or something through which it can, and this is key here, escape the loneliness that besets it without that which it has become identified with. So, looking for a way to escape my loneliness, I become attached to, identified with, that which remedializes it, fixes it for me. Mm-hmm. But, and here's the rub now, the minute that we become attached to something, the reason we're attached to it is because our sense of identity is wrapped up in it so thoroughly that when the conditions change that produced that relationship, which they always do, the person, the situation, the possessions, when these things go through their natural flux, the minute that starts to take place, I begin fearing the change. Because even my fear is what I thought I had gained for myself. And what had I gained for myself through this person or that possession was not the freedom from the loneliness, but a distraction from it.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, actually, totally. In other words, you're kind of reaching out through your fear to find something that'll kind of patch up the whole reason you have it in the first place. Is that
That's
sort of
it. That's it. And then when the conditions change, and all of us know this, my God, the whole been here, done that routine is through this endless set of pursuits we have to try and find ways to separate ourselves, liberate ourselves from what's punishing us. But the problem is that we never really meet the real reason that we have these fears, lonelinesses, worries, because instead of dealing with them directly, which we're created to do, Instead, we take an indirect route where we become attached to, identified with someone or something else until those conditions change, and then we're thrown right back. I call it finding ourselves at the start of the race again, where we thought we won something, but what we get is a starting gun that goes off, and we have to run again and again and again and again. You know that race, Daniel?
I think a lot of us do.
We all do.
Yeah, I typically like to use examples, for instance, on this program where I talk about money, because a lot of things come up for people when you talk about finances and money. For instance, if I was to give you $1 million, how would your life change? Okay? And then people would rattle off these things, and then you might even go deeper and say, why don't you go ahead and give me 50 ways your life would change? So they really have to think about it. When in truth, what it is, those things that you believe money will change for you are things that you're yearning to change for yourself that really don't cost anything but your time and your focus. Is that how you also talk with people? Not necessarily the money part, but those things that you think this will help you change, that's your real fear exchange there. What I'd like to show you is how you can liberate yourself through those fears to have the real freedom that you think this money might bring you.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when we examine the whole idea, for instance, of $1 million or a house on the coast in the south of France, whatever it may be that a person envisions. Huh?
I said the house in France is a good image. If anybody's ever been on the coast of France, they would know what I'm talking about.
Sure, Daniel, there we are. We're on the deck. We're sipping some good port. The smell of the ocean, and not a problem in sight. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Except for one thing. I'm there. Now, so let's look at this. When we talk about these, let's start with this. I'm going to give you a particular key idea. I call these key lessons. Mm-hmm. When you know that what you're looking for is what you already are and not what you may become, you stand then on the threshold of fearless living. I'm going to repeat it. When you know that what you're looking for is what you already are and not what you may become, then you stand on the threshold of fearless living. Now, let's tie that into the $1 million or the house on the coast. Mm-hmm. Why do we want those things, Daniel? Why do we want $1 million or a house on the coast or a Ferrari or a cabin on top of a mountain someplace with no phones, whatever it is that turns us on?
My best answer to that question, especially as you come to material things, you think of the cabin in the woods, so you get the chance to be isolated and quiet. You think of the Ferrari because that's almost a status symbol. You don't get it because it's great on gas mileage. But you get these things. You get these things possibly because it shows to the world that perhaps you're worthy.
That's right, because in my mind, no matter which of these examples I take, in my mind, it's equated with this idea of being a successful human being.
Okay.
Now, what is a successful human being? We're just using our minds properly here, moving down the logic trail. What is it? What does it mean to me? Why do I want to be a successful human being? And I'll answer it rhetorically. It's because then I would have the sense of security. I would have peace of mind. I wouldn't be, and more to the point, I wouldn't be afraid of unwanted, unexpected events because I would have a basis that would be solid enough that should they come along, I wouldn't be knocked down or bowled over. So now we're talking about the reason that we want, if we really peel it down, the reason that we seek the things we do in the world through the relationships that those possibilities exist in is because we want to be fearless human beings. We don't want to feel as though we are at the whim of any wind that comes along. Do you think that's safe to say?
Yeah, it's sort of the illusion that you can always be in control, and the true control is certainly, as when we had you on the show last time, the ability to let go and to surrender and sort of through your life, allow what may happen, and your experience allowing to enjoy what is happening for you, I think.
Yes. Well, I'll enlarge that slightly, and then we'll
Okay.
get back on the logic trail here.
Okay.
True success, true happiness, true peace of mind is knowing that whatever comes to you is made for you, and that you are made for it, in that the only thing that can come out of the encounter, whether it seems good or bad in the moment, is that you exit the moment a deeper, truer, more enriched human being capable of more kindness and compassion. That's what it means to be genuinely fearless. That's what we're looking for, is the understanding that life does not bring adversarial moments. It brings invitations to transcend the parts of ourselves that are adversarial in their own nature because of the demands they've placed on life to produce our mistaken idea of what success is. So back to what we were saying. What we're looking for is a fearless life. A life in which I'm not going to snap at anybody. A life in which if you do something that runs counter to my wishes, okay, so I don't want it, but I've got enough in the background here, and if you leave me, okay, you leave me, but now I'll be able to attract someone in my life because look at the basis I've got for it. All of our wishes are connected with trying to protect ourselves from this sense of losing ourselves that comes along every time life goes left when we thought it was going to go right. Now, I said the key lesson is that when you know that what you're looking for is what you already are and not what you may become, then you stand on the threshold of fearless living. The reason that's so important is because everything that we are presently doing, the way our mind now works, right back to the very beginning when we spoke, is that I'm trying to become something through something. I'm trying to become successful through that business. I'm trying to become patient through these 7 steps. In other words, we want to find something, and we go back to how I said the mind forms these objects. Our mind wants to wrap itself around and into something that when it considers its own imagined ideals, feels as though this is it. Because when I think about being this kind of person, I feel like I'm that kind of person, and now I know what to do, where to go, what I have to plan, and how I'm going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're betrayed by that mind, by that level of mind. Because whenever we intend to become something, we do so through imagining the powers we will achieve without ever recognizing that the only reason our present mind seeks the powers it does is because it is trying to escape an inherent sense of being powerless. So what we do is we actually empower our fears with everything we do to find a power outside of ourselves to be fearless. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. It's sort of a way of saying that you're going to allow your fear to stay there and keep stable the possibility that you might feel pain in a transformation that perhaps you're seeking. Is that sort of how it is?
Yes, it's a very on one hand deep and yet on the other hand very simple thing to understand, to see. For instance, and we do need to all, I say when I'm talking to people, I say take a nice deep breath, relax, so that these ideas don't fall on a mind that gets frantic with trying to understand them. We don't need to struggle to understand what's true. We just need to open our eyes. Mm-hmm. No fear, no psychological fear exists, Daniel, without negative imagination. Period. No psychological fear exists without negative imagination. Now, what does that mean? Let's go back to our example. Okay. I begin to imagine that I want to become a certain kind of person. And as I start to imagine it, there's two types of people. One imagines it and gets all the good feelings from that picture in their mind and then pursues the aims that they need to in order to prosper according to the idea.
Or to become that person they imagine themselves wanting to be. Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk about them in a moment.
Okay.
The other person, and this is probably the majority of us, begin to imagine what we want to be, but as soon as we start imagining it, the same mind that produces the picture then says, I don't think so. You know, you look at where you are. You don't have the education. You're not smart enough. If you could have, you would have by now. You're not cut out for that kind of life.
Not to interrupt you, but just to hit that key point, that's amazing. Okay, so you think you want to do these, you begin to possibly move, as you said, in the direction to do the things that will get you there, and then that chattering negative mind comes in and starts producing fears that will create those limitations from you getting to where you want to go.
Now we're getting. But now look. But Daniel, now let's go what you just said.
Okay.
But what is the mind that is now chattering and producing these negative conversations and images? What is that self? Who is that me? And how does it exist in that moment? From where is it getting this resistance?
It's funny to think that it actually is that simple sometimes.
It's getting it from its own picture.
Okay.
It's actually resisting the image it made in order to be free. So I become a slave, I become a captive of a fear that is produced by a mind that first envisions freedom and fearlessness and then begins to resist its own imagery and then turns me into someone who never will or who can't or who won't. Okay. And I don't see it happening because I don't recognize that that's the way my mind works, that it is a divided mind, and that first it will create for itself an image, and then as it produces the image, like for instance, the thought comes, well, what's going to happen tomorrow? Then I get negative and worried about tomorrow. Well, would I be negative and worried about tomorrow if my mind didn't first bring up the whole idea of tomorrow? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't. This is why Christ said, take no thought for tomorrow, because in the interior life, as we start to understand the way our mind works, we realize that when it is unattended by awareness and just operating in its own sort of default mechanism, that it cannot help but create, for instance, now we'll go to the other side. Let's say that we're not someone who negative talks themselves into debt, right. Spiritual debt, but I'm someone who says, yeah, I can do that. And then I go out and I'm fully identified with this picture of becoming successful. I love the way I'm going to be, what I'm going to become. And then I become that. I actually make the $1 million. Now, what happens next? The next thing is that this money that was supposed to bring me peace, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money. If we had all the time in the world, Daniel, I'd explain how everything that we do, if we do it with a wish to learn, eventually proves to us that what we really are looking for is found in the discovery that what we just found isn't it. Meaning that we're meant to continually transcend who we become and all of the confinement inherent in those definitions. So that there's nothing wrong with having goals and ambitions. One goes out and does what one does. But when we come to that point where we realize, you know what, now I'm sitting here on the deck in the south of France, and it's not enough. I'm bored silly, or I've become an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Now I need to travel, or I need to become a philanthropist, or I need to get a six-pack set of abs, or whatever it is that the mind then comes up with. Because at that point, we realize that this object that the mind had filled itself with is powerless to relieve us of this consistent sense of being incomplete. And that's what drives us. It produces the fear trying to become complete through something outside of ourselves and being identified with it, fearing the loss of it. and answering endlessly this, and I wouldn't know what to call it. It's just an unconscious nature. But the solution, and I'll be quiet now, is to wake up and recognize the truth of what we're saying. Because if we see what the mind is doing to itself, we will not participate in self-punishment.
Mm-hmm. I know that I'm sure that as you've worked with people over the many years, especially people as we like to address here that are approaching their middle age where they get to that point that they don't feel they're where they should be, they wish they would have done the things that they didn't do, and finally someone like you comes along and says, but you can still have all of these things. But the question is that truly what you want? Now, as you help and work with these people, do you see any real common themes that come up where pretty much you say, geez, the way you feel and think is pretty much the same way as this person over here. You just have different ways of expressing it. Do you see fear to be sort of a common message? I'm trying to form this the right way, but that sort of a message that seems consistent in all of us where we realize the real fear we have is that we're truly disconnected from ourselves.
Yes, very much so, Daniel, and it connects with all we've been speaking about, because there is a part of us that even though it says it wants to be new, it wants to grow and change things, is terrified of that at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And this is the contradiction in this divided mind. On one hand, I want to do and be and act and find and realize, and on the other hand, I'm afraid I can't do and find and realize and change, or that if I do step out of this, that I may wind up in a situation worse than I'm in now. And here's the point. That mind finds a sense of, a very estranged sense of security and comfort in reliving all that it has been and done, and even resenting itself for not taking new actions.
Oh, boy.
What we're interested in is seeing that we are prisoners of the past, of our own wish for a sense of continuity uninterrupted, or if interrupted, only by things of our choosing, so that we realize, you know what, look, why am I afraid to go take that new class on languages so that maybe if I do take that trip to Italy, I could communicate? Why don't I get that computer skill when my kids email me and I can barely turn the thing on? You fill in the blank. And the answer is that there is something inside of you that is literally trying to keep you who you have been at the cost of what you can be. And when we realize that the only thing that stands in our way, no matter how frightening it may seem, is what we have yet to understand about ourselves, and that nothing in the universe can stop us from growing in understanding, then we realize all we have to do is just start. Take the first step. If you will take the first step into any sense of limitation, fearful or otherwise, you will prove to yourself that the limitation was an illusion produced by imagination. But if you don't take the step, the imagined illusion grows more and more crystallized and becomes more and more a source of fear that we resist, and then become more confined within those terribly self-defining sets of ideals about ourselves.
It's really interesting for those of you just joining us here. We're talking with Guy Finley and about his book, The Essential Laws of Fearless Living, as you're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. And, as you're talking about this, it's kind of funny how you began to see the light, the genius behind what you're talking about. The fact is that we put ourselves in a life where we live in fear because we don't want to feel what that's like for that change, that growing as you're talking about. Right. And as you were just describing what you were, I was thinking for some reason of the movie Saturday Night Fever. Now, everybody remembers this, Tony the Big Disco King, but to me I've seen a really unique movie that really addressed what it was like to be in our late teens and early 20s and wonder if we really had a life out there, if the world would let us just go out and get it. And the most interesting scene, or one of the most interesting ones, is when he's having coffee for the first time with a potential new dance partner who is in Manhattan. She's 22 years old. She's really trying to make her way and be self-affirmed that she's willing to grow and try. And she asks him the simple question, well, did you ever consider going to college? And how frustratingly mad he was toward her about saying, I just didn't think about going to college. It was almost as to say, I just didn't think about growing, that how things are for me right now are pretty much okay. But he knew deep down inside this burning desire to be more, that it just wasn't enough to live in the neighborhood. It just wasn't enough to go on Saturday nights and be the main man on the dance floor, that there had to be more, but it was a matter of finding out where he could get that high again, as he said. And that's certainly what you're talking about here, is how do we learn to move through, first of all, recognize that fear that's holding us from getting out there and feeling and growing through the experiences that we desire to grow and experience.
Yeah. And here's what's so nice about it, is that, when you asked me why 35 works, 35 books and audio albums, and everybody, listen, open your heart, if you'll excuse me for saying that right now. Our lives are meant to be a continual revelation. I think we all know that, if we're not too damaged. There's something in us, the kid that's, struck with the first time he sees the ocean, or first time you find snow, or you see the caterpillar turn into a butterfly. There's this a sense of awe that there's no substitute for, because we, whether we realize it or not, grow. We're enlarged every moment of our life in which we are in a working, conscious relationship with something that is unfolding and revealing not just what is new in terms of the experience we see with our eyes, but we couldn't see and experience that with our eyes if we weren't experiencing it inwardly. So that if we realize that in this idea that life is meant to be revelation, well, unfortunately for us now, the idea of revelation is connected to going out and trying to get hold of things to know ourselves through. But what I'm speaking about in the Essential Laws of Fearless Living is that our life, moment to moment, we have an awareness, a capacity to attend to ourselves in the moment that produces a very beautiful kind of constant participation with what life is revealing to us about ourselves as it changes. Then we don't fear the changes, because we realize these changes are actually a kind of participant in this beautiful process of revealing to us increasingly this perfected life that's always outflowing, always moving out like a fountain. So that when we begin wanting this new kind of life, and we don't have to fear going out into the world and running into obstacles, because we're not running into a barrier that's saying, no, you can't. We're running into something that is saying, would you like to learn something new about yourself?
Uh-huh.
And that changes everything, Daniel.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, I guess one of the first, if you want to call it an exercise, of learning to live a fearless life is to, when a fear arises as you're moving into a direction that's new for you, something comes up to give you a reason to say, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. You move through it anyway. Is that pretty much how it works?
Take the first step.
Okay.
Here's a little poem that'll help with these kind of moments where we want to break out of our present captivity that produces that fear produces. It's a little poem. The feel is real, but the why is a lie. The feel is real, but the why is a lie. What does it mean the feel is real? Well, my mind is imagining all manner of impossible conditions, reasons why I can't, and when the mind does that, in its mechanical activity, it produces all of the chemical cocktail. The adrenals kick in, all the fear is there, and I feel it. You know, someone says, would you like to get up and talk in front of your social group, or do you want to take the lead in that business meeting? And you know naturally there's a part of you that realizes that there's time to be active and passive, and you ought to go ahead and take the risk. It's part of growth. But says, oh no, something in you, oh no, and you feel all of this fear, and it feels real. But now, as we grow in understanding, which is why I wrote the book, as we gain this new knowledge that Daniel and I are espousing, we realize, wait a minute, this feel is real, but I can see very clearly the why, meaning my mind resisting its own picture and then producing all of these problems for me. That's a lie. I do not have to give my attention to what is making me feel this fear. Instead, I can remember what I know is true and walk through the feeling. Walk through the feeling. When we do that, because it was mechanically produced by an unconscious activity of the mind, it will pass. And then we stand on the other side of the fear, and we are given a new kind of faith that every time we face a similar fear or a greater one, which is necessary, we will be able to meet it with the same new understanding and walk through it just as surely we did that.
It's just so neat to think of the many tiers. Like you said, you know, your first fear comes along. It's just this biochemical response to something that's new, something that's different. And you decide, well, that's fine, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And then a second one comes along, and then perhaps a third and fourth one, and then you find yourself beginning to gain more personal power. Now, I know that as you talk about in your book, you talk about the particular light, and you hear a lot of people use the light. You hear it in the Bible that we have this light inside of us. And you open the book with this statement, there's no brighter gift, no greater potential given to us human beings in the presence of a timeless light within us, whose power makes all things possible. Okay? And then you go on to ask the obvious question, if that light is already there, why do we have so many problems?
Yeah. Well, I love Daniel, that you're it's just a great set of questions, because you hit on something, and I was going to say something, and then you went ahead and just opened the door for me to say it. It's just great. Look, you said as we gain in understanding that this fear, that it feels real, but the why is a lie, then we grow in personal power. But the truth is, it is not we really who grow in personal power. What we grow in is in this light that allows us the awareness of where we were agreeing to be powerless. So the real power belongs to the relationship between us and the light that reveals where we had been deceived. And as we cease to participate in this unconscious activity due to the presence of this awakening, stirring understanding, little by little, the things that held us captive are seen to be what they have always been, which is merely an illusion produced by a mind asleep to itself. The more light, the easier it becomes for us to do what's right, because we're given liberation from what we had agreed to be a captive of without knowing it.
Oh, okay.
See how nice that is?
Well, it's just
and then oh wait. And then most important of all, Daniel, then there's nothing for us to be attached to.
My name is Kevin.
Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program. Did you have a comment or a question for Guy Finley?
Absolutely. I don't even think he knows what he's saying. I'm going to be honest with you. It sounds like a bunch of nonsense.
Okay, and why? What makes you think that, for instance?
Like the combination of words he uses is very smart. It seems like he's trying to confuse the person who hears it to the point where they'll believe it.
Okay, and so what has been your experience, I suppose, as you're trying to grow and develop and you feel that sense of fear that keeps you from experiencing that?
Well, I live life every day. I do what I got to do to pay the bills, live my life. I don't have any experience that would ever require me to look for a light in myself the most traumatic experience happened this past year where the mother of my child killed the child in her stomach, then married someone else, and all that happened, told courts I hit her. I just went through it. I had to plead out. I'm on probation. Mm-hmm. Where do these words he's saying even happen? Like, where do they relate to the regular person's life?
Okay, there you go. Guy, you're up on deck.
Well, the first thing that I would say to Kevin is that either we recognize that when we do something that harms another person, regardless of what they've done to us, that if we think to ourselves, yeah, that's what I wanted to do, then there's nothing else for me to say. But if we know in our hearts that we're not meant to hurt other human beings, let alone hurt ourselves, then we start to recognize that if I've done such things, that I didn't want to do them, and something made me do them. I acted against myself somehow, and against those that I loved. And I don't want to be that kind of person, but left to my own devices, the way that I am now, this anger takes me over, this impatience floods through me, and I become a person I don't even like being. That's the beginning.
Are you looking? I'm not looking for justification for what she did, for what happened, if that's what you're doing. And I wouldn't even call it impatience because it was months of, she showed up for court 5 months later. So I don't know if there's a lack of patience involved when you're lying about something and going through with it in that amount of time.
No, what I'm saying to you is that when we finally reach the point in our lives where we realize the absolute futility of blaming another individual for what we do, at that point, then we realize that the problem in our life hasn't been the behavior of others, but it's been a lack of understanding of myself, and that something in me compromises me as often as it does, and I don't want to live like that anymore. And until we reach a point like that, there's really very little that anyone can say to anybody. I'm not, Kevin, I'm not here to try to convince you of a thing, and I'm sorry that you don't like or understand what I'm saying, but I promise you that what I am saying holds the possibility of an individual possessing his or her own life so that no punishing thought or feeling can make them act against themselves.
So are you saying it's something in me and that I'm blaming other people, or I just want to understand what your words mean?
Well, here's a possibility, if I might be able to add. This is the host, Daniel Davis. Let's say, for instance, that you're at a job and you get fired, okay, and that does happen to people. Right. Then there's the possibility that as you leave that job and you go to look for other employment, and also as you're describing your experience to friends or family, what did you get fired for, that we can take a position that we immediately blame the boss. Well, the manager didn't understand me. It was bad management. It was all these other things first, and then maybe, it was because I was late a few times. And that you'll tend to live through that particular experience with that same story without saying, well, why don't I take responsibility, see what it was that maybe didn't mesh. Not that all jobs fit everybody, because that's part of learning what you like and how you can grow, but that you continue to live with that story, which makes you seek out anything that will affirm that you were right in the first place. And that's what Guy is
agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, how does that apply to my story where an abortion happened that I had no say in? So how is that my fault? Where she told courts I hit her when I didn't, how is that my fault? She married someone else. I don't understand what I'm taking responsibility for.
That's a very good question,
Kevin, I'll tell you, Kevin, would you go to an art store and buy a painting on the wall there that you hated, take it home and hang it up and look at it every morning and say, I hate that painting?
Well, I wouldn't do that. Absolutely not.
All right. Then why, Kevin, and this is what I'm asking you to see, then why would you continue to relive over and over and over again in your mind these things that were done to you through this relationship.
Well, I'm still forced to, as I have to go to a class.
No. You do not. You are not.
Well, I go to jail if I don't. So
you are not. No, Kevin. Even in jail, you are not forced to relive that moment.
Okay,
that's what
so
I'm trying to.
Tell me to forget about it and go to jail. Okay. What are you saying here?
I'm saying that your own mind goes and thinks about these things and torments you, and the only reason it has the power to do that is because you don't see it doing it to you. That there's something
legally, though, have to talk about it every week in a class. Legally, I have to, is what I'm saying. So it's not like I'm given a choice to move on. It's we think you beat this woman up, so let's talk about you and her. That's what I got to go through. It's not me. I'm not allowed to forget it.
Kevin, and does your mind belong to the person who facilitates the meetings you go to?
Absolutely, my whole life does. I go to jail.
Okay, and Kevin, I'm telling you that your mind belongs to you and no one else, and what you do with your attention is your choice and no one else's choice, and that you have the power within you to give your attention to what you want to give it to moment to moment.
Not in America. A judge told me what to do.
It, Daniel.
Let's obey that judge.
Daniel, I'm done.
Okay, we can't.
I really appreciate Kevin's comments. It's never an easy thing to understand something, especially as what we're talking about, and I think it's because even in our human minds that we do tend to complicate things more than we need to. But I certainly appreciate, Kevin, and I do wish you the best of luck, because I know it's the fact that that you do have to go through these experiences, but I hear clearly what you're saying too, Guy, is that you've got a choice of how you're going to be in that moment.
Now, Daniel, he has agreed to be a victim.
Okay.
He has agreed to be a victim. All of these things are being done to him. Not in America, he said.
Mm-hmm.
America, Shamerica. We all have a choice. Right now, while I'm talking to you, for instance, right now while you're listening to me, Kevin, if you're still on, it is my choice what I do with my attention. Do I give it to the parts of me that feel impatience? Do I give it to the part of me that relives where my mother said I would never become something? Do I give it to my ex-fiancé who left me, or who, by the way, had an abortion? Do I give it to what my mind wants to give it to, so that then I suffer as a result of resisting and resenting my own thoughts and feelings about what they did, so that I revisit what I call the scene of the crime, which is the past? Or do I use my attention the way I was given it, which is to attend to myself and to be present to all of these things that are trying to punish me?
Right.
Do my thoughts in this moment serve me, or are they stealing from me my right to be at peace? Mm-hmm. And if I can ask myself that question in the moment where I feel like everything's being poured down on me, I can choose to become awake and watchful of these thoughts and feelings that are so wearisome and want to punish me, or I can turn my will over to what they are doing and find myself walking down that road one more time where everything is being done to me and I have no choice in the moment. It is a lie. You have complete choice over what your experience is moment to moment if you will take responsibility for seeing that unattended, the mind will do nothing but drag you into its dark halls where hatred and fear waits for you.
It's just so interesting to try to move through, especially when you have those hardcore experiences like Kevin was describing, or perhaps...
And it is hardcore. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible what he has to go through. But can I learn from it, or do I burn from it, Daniel?
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please go on.
No, that's totally okay. I was actually listening to you.
And that's the bottom line. Do I learn from this, or do I burn from it? we know that burning does nothing. Hurts me, hurts the people around me, limits my possibilities. I've got this chip on my shoulder. I can't find work because I'm so angry. Everything I see relates to what happened to me back in the past, so I have no trust for anyone, no love possible. I'm absolutely a victim, not of what happened to me, but of what I am permitting to what I am permitting to be done to myself, by myself, in the moment.
Right. And again, the title of the book is The Essential Laws of Fearless Living. And, I want to appreciate Kevin, especially for coming on and sharing what, definitely is a very hard experience when you think that, as he was describing, it was a girlfriend who had an abortion that he didn't know about, that he gets punished for it, and now he's continuing to sort of punish himself, even though he's got to do what needs to be done by law. But the guy simply and clearly said, look, you can keep reliving that and staying in that and stewing in it, or you can choose to think in a different direction and move through that experience, knowing there's a very good chance that won't happen again because of the experience that you've had as a result of that.
And he said, but how can I do that when I have to keep going through now? I got to go through, these meetings. I got a court trial. I may go to jail. Yes, look, we do certain things. We're going to pay for it. But can I even go through that? Can I recognize that, look, when I have a change of heart, it doesn't mean that the repercussions of what I did in my other mindset go away. I must reciprocate. I must pay for what I've been. But if I keep being what I was and growing in the anger or the fear or the resentment and blaming everyone, I can guarantee that it will not get better. The bitterness will consume us if we don't make a stand inwardly in recognizing that we don't have to do anything other than release it. Catch yourself being dragged into it, release it. Start over. And if we do that, I promise we discover that there is a way in which we can live without having to relive what has made us so fearful and angry.
And that's just it. It's just understanding that you can do that you can move through these things and actually grow and develop rather than being held hostage of it. Again, I wish Kevin out there the very best of luck. He may not agree with what we're talking about today, and that is a choice. See, you're exercising what we're talking about. That is that you have chosen to say, well, I'm not so sure this book is for me or what he's talking about makes any sense. That's the power of also what Guy's been talking about, is that you have that choice, just as you have that choice that even though you are still being punished by this girl who made a choice outside of your realm, okay, the fact is you can choose to say, okay, I know I've got to go through this, I'm put here, but I can still have a positive attitude and learn to grow through it, so you'll attract an even better relationship than you had with somebody who was so obviously selfish through her actions and punishing you as an indirect result of those selfish actions. So it sounds to me, Kevin, that you're on the right road, and I think, Guy, you would agree with me as well.
We can summarize that with another little poem. The attending is the blending. What we connect ourselves to moment is what creates our experience of the moment. And if I find that I'm tired of being angry and bitter, all I have to do is wake up in the moment, look and see, well, what am I connected to? I'm reliving my resentment. Well, what if I disconnect myself from that sense of self that I've been carrying around with me? How do I do that? I give my attention, no matter how we start, to something else. I bring myself into the present moment. Maybe I pick up a book. Maybe I take a walk. But I refuse to allow myself to drag myself into the dark past where all the pain is.
Mm-hmm. Well, Guy Finley, it's really been a pleasure to have you on the program, and I'm certain or hopefully that the people who are listening realize that it isn't just a bunch of lofty, great words, but in fact,
this is so
the heart of things, that you can realize what the simple truth is. And again, I think it's funny how the simplest things always tend to succeed, and when they're too simple, we tend to have to actually scramble them up and make them complicated. And I guess the beauty of what we've been talking about here today is its simplicity, and I think that could be what might have frustrated Kevin was the simplicity of what we were talking about and how it could actually help him grow.
It is down to earth.
Yeah,
it is down to earth. And look, Kevin, if you want to have any interest at all in learning a little bit more, go to my website, which is Guy Finley, Finley, GuyFinley.org, and you look through the frequently asked questions section. It's just months worth of free material there to look through. Maybe you can find something that will help you better understand what we were talking about. And those who are interested in the book, if I can quickly, Daniel.
Sure.
My foundation is offering 6 free gifts, a free DVD, MP3s, a host of free gifts. If the person listening is interested, go to essentiallaws.com, essentiallaws.com, and it'll take you through some steps. You'll order through Amazon, the discounted price of the book, and then you'll get 6 free gifts through my foundation that are worth quite a bit. So essentiallaws.com, if you're interested in the book and want the free gifts, or if you're just interested in the free material that Daniel and I are talking about, go to GuyFinley.org and start the process of learning that there really isn't anything that happens to you that can't be made into something revealing and releasing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Guy Finley, again, it's been a pleasure to have you back on our program again today. And again, the book is The Essential Laws of Fearless Living. If you want to feel what it feels like to be fearless, just give it a shot. Guy, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Daniel, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I do enjoy our conversations.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Daniel Davis. I want to also thank our guests for tuning in today and joining us. To find out more about the Beyond 50 radio program, just simply log on to our website, which is beyond50radio.com. That is 50 with a 50. We'd also thank our sponsors today, GoToMeeting. There used to be only 2 ways to meet for business, over the phone or in person. Now there's a better way. Use GoToMeeting to meet online. With GoToMeeting, everyone sees your computer desktop on their computer screen. So you get the best of both worlds. It's like meeting in person, but without wasting time and money traveling. And your conference calls will be more effective. The best part is you can try GoToMeeting free right now for just 30 days. For this special offer, you must visit www.gotomeeting.com/podcasts. That's gotomeeting.com/podcasts for a free trial. I want to also thank everybody for participating, especially Kevin, and I do wish you the very best of luck, and hopefully you'll tune into our future shows. And I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, live your day past halfway.